Hey everybody, Justin here. I want to say hello to Rachel and Matthew, Daniela, and Dr. Martin. Thanks for checking out my program project here that I put together. Put together three programs here, of course, for each level of public school. I hope you guys like what we put together here. Really try to be thoughtful and pick some really notable composers who are, as we found over the last few weeks, really noted for writing quality, high artistic value music at each level. So let's take a look at what I have. All right, so for my elementary level program here, I try to base it off of a theme of some multicultural music, but I didn't want to go over the top with it. I wanted to add a little bit of variety to it. So there are a few exceptions just to keep it all fresh. I suggested starting off here with The Tempest from Robert W. Smith. It's an exciting piece. It's got the energy of a fanfare in some ways, but it's a really quality piece for the beginning band. I was really impressed, taking a listen to this. This is one of those pieces that I've heard bounced around, but I actually have not performed myself yet. I plan on acquiring the score for this in the somewhat near future, whenever I get my ensemble back together in the school, post COVID. But this is a quality piece, nice, exciting piece to start the concert off. After that one, I'm going to Comet Ride by Brian Balmage. I'm super impressed with Brian Balmage. I'm a bit of a fan of his. I've really done quite a few different of his pieces with my bands in the past, and they've all been hits. The students really seem to gravitate towards them. They're good motivators, and at the end of the day, they sound great. He gets a lot from pretty modest skill levels. I know he goes right on up through the more difficult levels, right on up through 4 and so on. But I really like his beginner band music. Comet Ride is one of those pieces. Starts kind of off a little bit slow and mysterious, and then boom, it gets right into a quick tempo pretty quickly, and it has a lot of dynamic contrast. It has repeating ideas, but it has a nice section in the middle that really thins out in the texture and gets to highlight the dynamic levels of the ensemble. This is one of those pieces that students can come back to, down the road if they continue on through middle and high school, and just their musicality will make the piece sound better. It's of course going to stay technically easy, but it's a really, popular piece I've had a lot of success with amongst my ensemble. So I put that second. It's a little more challenging for the beginner band, especially if it's a first or second year student. But I believe that this is a good quality piece. So being the core repertoire, I put a second in the whole program, just because it's going to be a little bit more taxing and challenging than some of the other pieces. Third, I put Japanese Folk Trilogy from Anne McGinty. I think we've seen Anne's name pop up quite a few times, especially in the grades 1, 2 repertoire. She writes some good stuff, some good arrangements, good compositions of her own. This, of course, is an arrangement of 3 Japanese folk songs, including folk tunes into what we do is something very, pretty important to music education is in public schools. So that satisfies that. It talks about, obviously Japanese content. So we're being multicultural here. This gives an opportunity to tie in some outside, maybe conversations, some history lessons, and so on. 3 different folk tunes in there. Adds a little bit of variety. It's about a 3-minute long piece, just a little bit under. So it's going to be one of the longer pieces on the concert. So I put it up earlier in the program just so that, get the more endurance pieces out of the way early. Fourth, I wanted to keep with that Far East tradition, that Far East multicultural aspect. And I put in the Dragon Dance by Michael Story. This is a kind of a 0.5 grade, like kind of halfway between, not quite even a grade 1. So it's really accessible for the beginning band students. So if you've got those students that are just, they're slow to learn, they're not necessarily the leaders in the ensemble, but they're there. And some of them, they work really hard. Some of them maybe not. This would be a great piece to build their confidence as well. So if they were struggling with Comet Ride or Japanese Folk Trilogy, this one's going to be a little bit more accessible for them as a shorter piece. And, it has to do with the Far East here. The Dragon Dance is integral to the Lunar New Year celebrations. So this is an opportunity to educate the students on it. You can narrate to the audience and talk about what the Dragon Dance is, with the dancers, with the poles, with the dragon, puppet marionette on top of it. You can go over that, the inspiration of it as well. Fifth in the lineup, I put A Shaker Hymn by John O'Reilly. This is another one of those kind of 0.5 grade 1 sort of pieces. So it's more accessible for the same students we just spoke about, those, really beginner band students who just trying to build some confidence under the spotlight of the concert stage. About 2-minute long piece here. This one, Shaker Hymn, we're talking about, an American folk tradition here as well. A Shaker Hymn has a key change in it. It's got some call and response. It gives it a nice way to, highlight different sections of the band a little bit there. So it's it's a nice quality piece, for some beginning band. Going on to the sixth selection here, I put Anasazi. This is one that Dr. Martin suggested we take a look at, in depth in his examples when we looked at grade one. I had, done this piece in the past, but I didn't. Maybe I've, in retrospect, maybe took it a little bit for granted. I had some success with it, but when we looked at it, during the semester, I have a greater appreciation for it now. It's a nice piece. It's again multicultural in the sense that it talks about the Anasazi Indian tribe that was, from the four corners of the, Southwest United States, known for their, dwellings. You could speak about that to the audience, and of course how they disappeared without a trace in a single generation. A little bit mysterious, and I really think that inspired John Edmondson's composition, especially in the melodic lines. They have a mysterious kind of feeling to it. It's got arch form. You could, talk about that with the students. It keeps it kind of fresh for the audience. They hear an idea, it comes back. So it's got some familiarity, but it's not overly repetitive. So a nice piece there. I threw that one in there sixth. It's another little bit of a longer piece following the easier Dragon Dance and Shaker Hymn, before we move on to the seventh selection here, which is a touch of Baroque by Sandy Feldstein and John O'Reilly. I believe this piece is out of print now, but I found this one on the AICHI standard repertoire list of recommended works that was in one of the readings we had in the recent weeks. This one touches upon a bit of a Baroque flavor. It's a bit of an introduction to speaking about the music of the 15th century and so on, going back to the 1600s, early 1700s and so on. It just kind of sets the ground for that. You have to touch a little bit upon it. This could be an opportunity to share some videos of, Baroque instruments. Obviously, we're not going to get into any sort of, historically period correct performance practice or anything, but this at least gives some sort of a frame of reference for our young students, so that if they stick with music, inevitably hear about Johann Sebastian Bach, they at least have an idea of the time he's lived in. It's not just some weird B word that they don't know how to spell or say Baroque. But there you go. It's a little bit of an introduction on the historical side of it as well. And to end the concert off, I put Discovery March by John Edmondson. It's a bit of a British flavor march. The British marches are so celebrated in the wind repertoire, especially of, the late 1800s, in the first half of the 20th century as well. So the Discovery March, it's a march piece. Great way to end the concert. I think that's one of the traditions of what we do with wind band music, is, ending it with a march. It's a very common way to end it. So a nice piece there to end it off. Keeping it at a grade one there. Didn't really want to go above a grade one here because depending on the elementary school you're in, your program may start in fourth grade and go through sixth grade, but in other times it may just start in sixth grade. So for, where I come from, there's not really a lot of programs that are going at fourth grader anymore, especially in the district I teach. There's almost nothing in any of the elementary schools. So I wanted to just keep this really modest with the difficulty level, but pick some pieces that really highlight the abilities at that level. So if you add up the times of all of them, I put them over here on the right. It comes to about 17 and a half minutes if there were no breaks and no narration, which of course there will be. It takes time to get the students on and off the stage. Speak to the audience between, a couple songs, maybe not every song, maybe depends on how you do it. Obviously some time for the students to change music. So you're looking at about a 25-minute, maybe to a half-hour concert, depending on how much narration there is. Again, I try to put, make it a multicultural influence with some exceptions just to keep it fresh. So there's my elementary program. So let's check out the middle school program. So for my middle school program, I put together this one here. We've got 7 pieces. I started off with Falcon Fanfare, which is another Brian Balmage piece. It's a grade 2. It's a fanfare, straight up. So it's got, it's invigorating. It's got some excitement. It's got some nice cluster chords in there, a little bit of moving tonality towards the end. It's a strong opening piece. I've used this one in the past. As long as your students have a little bit of endurance, there is a little bit of pushing the upper range for the trumpets, but with a good warm-up before the concert gets started, they should be in good shape. As long as they don't overplay this, we'll make sure their chops are ready to go for the rest of the show. Now, I admit the second piece on this program is a bit ambitious for the middle school level, but if you do happen to come from a district where elementary school has 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, this one really should be one that could be touched upon, especially by maybe your 8th graders, your more elite middle school students. And I put Flourish for the Wind Band by Ralph Vaughan Williams. This is one of the top, revered pieces in the repertoire, especially at a lower grade level. So, it's a grade level 3. So from Vaughan Williams, that's a bit of a more accessible piece. But there's a lot of, content going on in this piece. It's a quality piece of music. I think we could all agree on that. We've come across it a few times. We've looked at it even here in some of our modules. So I put that one second because that's really going to be the core focus piece of the rehearsals leading up to this concert. And one of those examples of absolute highest quality there is in the wind repertoire at this level. Following that up, I put a bit of a crowd pleaser in here, Egyptique by William Owens. It's a grade 2, not too long of a piece. There's some tempo changes, and it's, as the name suggests, it kind of touches upon the style of Egyptian sounding music. There is a lot of accidentals in it. It's got a nice strong low end. So your low brass, your bass sections are going to have a nice strong part too. The drum part is kind of fun as well. And the melodies, they're somewhat chromatic in some parts, and there's some antiphony going on, some call and response. It's a fun piece. I like to put that one in there when I can. Sometimes mix it up. I found it's a bit of a crowd pleaser too, because people go, especially you're less familiar with wind band music audience members, oh, this one sounds cool. So it's a bit of a crowd pleaser. So I threw that one in there. Following that one up, really shifting the whole mood of the concert. A nice, slower, more lyrical piece, Eventide by Preston Hazard. I was really impressed with this piece, really like it. Have not performed it before. I would like to in the future, but this is going to be one of those pieces that your band's going to need to have intonation and some musical maturity. It's longer. It's a little over 4 minutes long, but it's a beautiful piece. If you have not listened to it yet, please check it out. I tried to throw it on my list when we took a look at grade 2. Really want to perform this piece. It's a beautiful piece, and it's one of the more slower, it's one of the more lower energy pieces on the program, which is something I really, really considered when I look at concert programming previously, now, and into the future. One thing that's been consistent for me is I try to control the energy level so you don't wear out your audience. You try to, follow up a high energy piece with something a little bit more relaxed so that there's some dynamic level to the overall program. So to follow that one up, because some people, aren't not necessarily a fan of slow pieces, I put in a total crowd pleaser. Not necessarily something I would consider a piece of high artistic merit, but it is a quality arrangement for the wind band of, Henry Mancini's Pink Panther theme. One of the more memorable themes of the 20th century. Henry Mancini is one of those, more notable quality composers that was used quite a bit in the post-war years for, popular media music. Between him and Quincy Jones, there's, a ton of hits that came out of the late 50s, 60s, 70s, and right on, for Quincy Jones, at least up and through the 80s. But Henry Mancini, introduced him to the students. Now we're starting to get pretty far from the 60s. So it's time to start talking about that as a historical period as well. Sixth, I put on A Suffolk Celebration by John Kenyon. It's another one, sort of folk song inspired pieces. It really will highlight the balance and the blend of the band, which obviously has been noted earlier in the program, but as the program goes on, again, kind of touch upon that sort of a focus and control the energy level of the performance. It's an ABA form, so your audience will have, some familiarity at the, bookending the B section in the middle there. John Kenyon, pretty solid. I've liked a lot of his works here. I found them to be of decent quality, and they highlight the wind band pretty appropriately and well for the level. This one's beginning to be kind of difficult to find. It's still available some places, but I think it's gone out of print. So if you check it out and you like it, grab it. I could see this being used as a festival piece as well, if you're in a district where that's part of the focus and the goals. And I'd end this program off with Douglas E. Wagner's arrangement of Percy Granger's Children March. One of the elite, if not the guy for wind band music of especially the 20th century. Introduced the kids to Granger. A lot of the stuff he's done is way up there. We're looking at something like Lincolnshire Bossy. If you could perform that with a public school band, then let me know. I'll come check it out. For me, being a middle school teacher in a district that doesn't really have a feeder program, reaching Granger stuff is going to be a tall tale, but reaching an arrangement of it to make it at least somewhat accessible for the developing musician, I would put this arrangement in there. It maintains the spirit and the flavor that Granger used. in a bit of a, I don't want to call it a watered down sense, but a more accessible sense here. And, we can introduce the audience to Percy Grainger. Children's March is one of those pieces that he wrote when he was in the military. I would, of course, preface that to the audience. It's a march, again, ending the piece, or ending the whole program with a march, a bit of a wind band tradition. And what better way to do it than with Grainger, right? He's just one of those guys that we got to keep his name alive in the youth and of the audience that comes as well. So there you go. That's my middle school program. I didn't really follow a theme for this one. You may have noticed. I did just want to put in quality pieces throughout. I wanted to focus more on following like a bit of an energy level adjustment throughout the program to make sure your audience stays engaged, your students stay engaged, and I really wanted to consider as well the endurance of the musician, because now you're starting to get to a decently longer program, but maybe not lengthwise, but how many notes are being played in the chops necessary for it. All in all, without any breaks or narration, this adds up to be roughly 19 minutes or so. Obviously, there will be narration. Obviously, there'll be time to get on and off the stage, some breaks between the piece. So again, kind of like the elementary concert, you're coming in around somewhere around 25, 30 minutes with some narration and breaks. For this one, I really wanted to build it around the theme of just the great wind composers of the past, present, and future. Perhaps starting off this one, maybe not less, maybe less known as a wind composer, but of course, this is an arrangement by James Swearingen of Camille Saint-Saëns' Marche Militaire Français, his French military march. Starting off with the march, a little bit different, but this one, it introduces the students and, of course, the audience into a romantic style, late romantic period music. Camille Saint-Saëns, one of the French romantic, composers. Nice quality piece here. It's a grade 3. So, this, I didn't want to go too hard with the high school program, as, the average program may not necessarily be reaching up to your upper 4s and 5s on regular basis. So starting off with a 3 here makes it accessible for your freshmen, hopefully, and able to grasp by your senior members of the ensemble as well. I'm not sure we really, as a community, at least in my education, public school wise, wasn't really, touching upon the romantic period and, those great composers of the late 1800s. So that's where I'd start this one off. Second, a very challenging piece, in my opinion. It is, kind of one of those upper grade 3 pieces, but it's long. And, Nil Heibel's, Corsican Litany. Very interesting backstory when you look into what the Corsican Litany is. So I would, highlight that story to the students. I don't know if I would necessarily talk about the backstory narrating to the audience, but I maybe would give a little bit of some backstory of that, Italian Mediterranean, sort of death march sort of thing. Not really a death march, but dealing with, a litany. So really, this is one of those pieces I hope to perform someday. Pretty much this whole program here is one of those dream programs for me, because I don't have students of this, technical facility, at my level where I teach in middle school. Third, I put on Shenandoah by Frank DeKelly. I mean, Matthew, I know you and I had some conversations about, is this a 3? Is this a 4? I even asked Dr. Martin, because I chose this one for, my deep analysis for grade 3. I argue that it is a grade 3. Technically, when you look at the score, it looks on paper as like one of those pieces that is doable. But really, it requires such musical maturity. I feel like this could be done by a band that can grasp the grade 3 level, but it could also be done by a professional ensemble that's playing grade 6 all the time, and it would still sound appropriate, because it really amplifies the musical maturity of the musician and, of course, of the ensemble. So this is one of those pieces I really hope to perform someday. It's just beautiful. Frank DeKelly. You may not like all of his pieces, but this one is just one of those modern masterpieces for the wind band that I think that is going to be performed. I think it's going to stay in the repertoire for 100 years. It's going to be one of those pieces that's not going away. So if you're at the level where you can do it and think of me, because I can't necessarily touch on it with my band right now. So for the fourth selection, I threw in here, this is probably one of the more thick pieces on this program. I didn't necessarily put it all the way up front. I did put Corsican Kid Litany earlier, but Gustav Holst's second suite in F. I personally am more of a fan of the first suite, but the second suite in F, I performed this one my freshman year in high school. It's a 4-movement piece. It has, some nice contrast between the 4 movements. It starts off with a march. It ends, of course, with the Fantasia on the Dargis. And one of those classic pieces of wind band repertoire. And I personally speaking, I wasn't necessarily the most into it band student when I was in my freshman year of band, but if if it wasn't for this piece, I might not be doing this today. It's one of those more inspirational pieces. And I find that even when I play this around some of my friends who do not listen to in-band music, they really enjoy it. Even if they're not necessarily fans of classical music, I think it's one of those more accessible pieces that really gets the attention of an audience, regardless of their interest level in what we do. So I would put that one in there at the fourth position. And of course, I mean, it's Holst, right? If we're going to talk about the great wind composers of the past, present, and the future, he's got to be put in there. I think I'd fight on that one. He's just, for me, he's my personal guy I would go to as my favorite wind composer for, our repertoire. Fifth, I put in Voices of the Sky by Samuel Hazo. I wasn't familiar with Hazo before this, course that we've taken here, but upon looking at some of his work, especially from the grade 4 level and on upward, maybe some of the 3, but from 4 and on upward, he's writing some great stuff. I was very impressed with what he has. So I'd put this as one of those composers that's going to be notable in the future years. He's obviously already doing it, but really solid piece here. Voices of the Sky. It's a beautiful piece. It's got, some lyrical sections and some more menacing, faster sections that are a little bit difficult. It's got some, interesting meter stuff thrown in there as well. So there's a lot to chew on this piece. It's a solid grade 4 piece. Challenging, but I think it's a nice piece to throw on the concert here. And, right before the final piece here, a little bit shorter, it's back to a grade 3 so that, if the chops are beat up a little bit, if the endurance is starting to get stressed, this is one of those lively pieces. Great way to end the show. And your audience, if they haven't heard this one and they've been in this country for a long time, any more than a couple of years, it's our duty to fill them in. On the Washington Post, of course, John Philip Sousa. You got to mention this one to the crowd. You got to talk to your audience right before your final piece. I would, say, the March King, John Philip Sousa. Make sure your audience knows who he is. I think, if they've had any musical education, they will. But not only are we teaching our students, in our classes, but we got to educate some of the audience members as well. They've missed out on some stuff. And the Washington Post has got an interesting connection to, being an essay program for students back in the late 1800s. I think it was 1889, I believe, when Sousa wrote it. So it ties back into education again. So I'll throw that in last. Altogether, if there were no breaks or narration, this would be a 37-minute performance, which is obviously going to go closer to 45 when you consider breaks, narration, getting on and off the stage. But I think, this is one of those concerts that, even though it's a little bit, almost twice as long as my elementary or middle school programs, this one is just going to have a nice balance of different pieces and different energies to go throughout the concert. It starts off with a march. Corsican Litany's got quite a bit going on. Shenandoah is a, lower energy, but absolutely beautiful piece. Second Suite has, a little bit of everything. The march is really happening. It's got a lot of life. A song without words, like Shenandoah, a little bit more lower energy beauty piece, going through the darkest and so on. It kind of controls the different levels of energy. Voices of the Sky, same thing. It's lyrical. Then it's got some energy, but in shorter time periods between each section. So it plays with the energy of your audience. It keeps them from, pulling out their phone, having conversations with their neighbor, because as soon as things get quiet for a little while, boom, it's right back in their face, and they're end the conversation, listen to the music, try to keep them engaged. And ending with the Washington Post, some nice energy. But that's what I've got, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this. Those are the 3 programs I've put together. Now, I'm really open to hearing your thoughts, and I'm really excited to take a listen at what you guys have as well. Feel free to be really critical of how I've put this together. I really like to hear different ideas. Maybe I did something you liked, maybe I did something you didn't like. Please let me know. Don't feel bad. I've got a thick skin. I can take it. It's all good. It's all to make us better, right? So thanks for checking this out, guys. I really hope you've enjoyed it. I'm really looking forward to seeing your videos and to be able to see you guys, be able to see your faces. So I really enjoyed our conversations we've had over the last few weeks. I've learned a ton over this time. There's quite a few composers that maybe I was aware of that I didn't realize how notable they really are. And there's a lot of people that I was unaware of. And I've really enjoyed, especially taking a look at some levels that I really am not really able to, get into too much with the group I have with their limits. But it's been really a fantastic time. So I want to thank each one of you, and of course, Dr. Martin, for leading our instruction. So, all right, guys, let's finish strong here. And thanks for everything, guys. And I'll see you around. Peace.